Another edition of NAMI at Home Facebook Live. We are super excited to be here. I want to remind everybody that this is National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, and you can find so much information about what that means by going to NAMI.org, and right on the front page, you can click on a little button and it will take you to the website. I was going to put the link there, but it's like this really massive link that would just take forever to try to memorize, and there's just no way to make it live on the little screen. But if I figure it out, we will, because I would make this link live, absolutely. For those who tune in week after week, I'm always plugging NAMI Tennessee's email list. It's namitn.org, and it tells you about all the cool things that NAMI Tennessee is up to, from the advocacy work to these Facebook Lives to curated content to help you through mental health challenges and support groups. And of course, we did the walk, and we plugged this very event that you are tuned in to right now. All right, enough about that. Let's bring our super cool guests onto the screen. Allie, Marisa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having us, Gabe. It's such a privilege to get to be here and tell you a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we can partner.
Awesome. Well, let's start off with introducing yourselves. I know that you are with, look, I've got it right here. You are with Autism in Motion Clinics. There is the website. But tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who wants to go first?
Sure, I'll get us kicked off. So we represent Autism in Motion Clinics, or AIM Clinics, and it's our mission to support and inspire children with autism, their families, and our community. So my name is Allie Thomas, and I lead our community outreach efforts at Autism in Motion. We really specialize in applied behavioral analysis, or ABA therapy, that we're going to dive into today. And so I'm also joined by my very talented colleague, Marisa.
Hi, y'all. I'm Marisa Edmonds. As Allie said, I am one of the board-certified behavior analysts here at AIM Clinics. I'm based out of our Murfreesboro clinic, where I work with learners from age 2 to age 15 who are on the autism spectrum, their families, their schools, and their community partners, to make sure that we are helping them reach their full potential on a daily basis.
Well, thank you both for being here. We look forward to a great, great show. Now, listen, before we get started with some of the questions that have already been sent in, we want to remind everybody that you can ask short questions in the comment section. Just type them in and we will pop them up on the screen like so. Look how easy that is. And our esteemed guests will try to answer as many as they can. But we've got some questions to kick us off. The first one is, we want to define our terms. And I understand, Marisa, that you are the expert on this. What is the definition of autism?
That is a great question, especially because that definition has evolved a lot. So when we talk about autism, we're actually referring to a group of complex disorders that affect brain development. And there are some common characteristics. We're talking about difficulties in social interaction, oftentimes challenges with both verbal and nonverbal communication, and some inflexible, repetitive behaviors. And if we're looking back a decade or two, prior to 2013, there were actually a number of different labels to encompass all of the different diagnoses that we now refer to under that blanket of ASD, or autism spectrum disorder. And it's important to note, one of my favorite quotes is, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. There are so many intricacies and so many unique aspects of every learner that we work with, bound by some of those common characteristics of that ASD diagnosis.
Oh, thank you so very much. Now, one of the things that you both, or your clinic, specializes in is something called ABA therapy. What is ABA therapy?
Sure. So I'll give you kind of the entry-level definition, and then I'll hand it over to Marisa to add a bit more color, since she's our clinical expert. So when we think of ABA therapy, or applied behavioral analysis therapy, really what we're thinking of there is, it is an evidence-based approach that is social and behavioral therapy for individuals with autism. At AIM Clinics, we specialize with a pediatric population, so typically 18 months to 18 years is is the age of our typical client. But with that, we're really focusing on those behavioral and social goals to allow our clients to work toward independence. Now, of course, goals and skills, those seem like big umbrella terms, right? The goals that I have might be different than the goals that you have, Gabe, or that Marisa has. And so with that, we really have an individualized approach through ABA, where we're able to have an individualized treatment plan for each child or teen that we serve to really zero in and focus on the areas that they want to grow and those areas where they need support. Because just as Marisa said, that spectrum is a varied one. And so with each client that we work with, the approach looks slightly different.
So that sort of brings me to my next question. I mean, first I want to do you have anything to add? I don't want to cut you off before. I want to give you the opportunity to, what's your rebuttal? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, perfect, Marisa. Fill in my gaps, please.
I will say my favorite part of ABA is that first A, applied, right? We are not applying a cookie cutter curriculum. We are meeting with families. We're meeting families where they're at, and we're making sure that whatever those goals are socially significant to their daily context and to their needs. So one of my favorite things about it that I think is unique to ABA as a discipline is just how closely we are able to work with those families and making sure that everything we do is, as Ali said, as individualized as possible to the family priorities and the learner's needs.
Thank you so much. Now, I'm guessing this is going to be a Marisa question, but I have been fooled before, so don't feel like Marisa has to answer it. But what does a typical ABA session look like?
That's a trick question.
Oh, right. You just explained that it's different for everybody, but how do you arrive at that? I guess part of you're right. That is really tough. It's like saying, what does a typical concert look like? But is it a rock concert? Because that looks very different. But are there similarities? Like what would the very first, like the intake, for lack of a better word? I think the question really evolved from people who are nervous about bringing their child. What can they expect when they walk in the room and they look at you and now ABA is being discussed?
For sure. And sometimes ABA sessions do look like rock concerts, depending on what the child is interested in. I have a few music fans on my caseload. ABA, especially ABA, the way we practice it at AIM, honestly looks like a child engaging in play and a child living their best life. So our clinics are state-of-the-art and designed to be child-friendly. We have multiple spaces across the clinic where they engage in their different activities. So we have an area called NET that's set up very similarly to a kindergarten classroom, with a circle time area and with a block center and with dramatic play stations and a little kitchen. We also have an active playroom in every clinic with trampolines and swings. We have rooms for all of our teens where they get to play foosball with their friends. We have more games and books than anyone could dream of in their ideal playroom. And so much of the treatment that we do in each session is about following that learner's lead, figuring out what appeals most to them, and then using those strengths to really build on their progress. So if a learner is struggling with using their expressive language to ask for things, well, we set them up with some of their favorite things and then create opportunities for them to ask for that Play-Doh, for them to ask to engage with their watercolors, for them to build the most wonderful, amazing magnetile structure in the world. So while there is no typical ABA session, I will say that all of our ABA sessions do follow that child's lead and then are sort of scaffolded to meet them where those goals are at. And that is why we spend, and you touched a little bit on the intake process, that is why we spend so much time in the intake process. We want to get to know the family. We always say we know the science of ABA, but our families are the experts in their individual kids. And so we want to hear those insights. We want to hear about priorities. I'm actually in the middle of taking on a new kiddo right now. And, Mom and I spent a few hours together this morning talking about some of those favorite things, how we can work in those opportunities to make his learning plan as suited to him as possible, to those strengths he has and those needs that he has as well.
So this is sort of a follow-up question. You mentioned that you work with both the child and the family. So and you're both shaking your head, so I've hit upon it. How does that work? Who is the client? Is the and I know I'm speaking clinically, but is the client the family?
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody work together? Do you ever work with the child alone, the family alone? How does that all work itself out?
Great question, Gabe. So I think with that, like I said, in our mission, we exist to serve the child, the family, and our community. And so as Marisa shared, it's applied behavioral analysis for a reason. Depending on who's in that environment and what that environment looks like, our treatment might look a bit different. And so with that, our primary client or patient is going to be the child, right? That's who we're going to spend the most contact time with. However, as Marisa shared, with our parents, they are the expert in their child. And so with that, any of our clinical treatment plans, anytime that we have a client with us engaging in ABA therapy and in treatment, that also includes family engagement. So that might look like parent kind of training sessions where we're looking at some of the kind of behavioral science and giving tips, tricks, and strategies to allow them to utilize that at home to help their child generalize skills that they're working on in the clinic to their home environment. That also might include things like bringing in grandparents or big brother, big sister. Marisa alluded a little bit toward the collaboration we do with teachers. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's a true one. It takes a village. And so with that, with the children that we serve, we really see that village as the community that we're going to also engage in that treatment to be able to best help and support the child.
Wonderful. Now, a question popped into my IM, and I was able to capture it here. What if the client, the child, disagrees with the parents, especially in teenagers? When you said it was a collaborative, what happens when it's a tie? What happens when the child wants one thing, or the client wants one thing, and the parents want another, and they're deadlocked? I imagine that this is probably very typical.
Sure. So I think that can most definitely happen. And you saw me smile big for that one. I'm a former high school counselor myself. And so this is something I've seen kind of across a variety of environments. And so with that, I think one of those things is when it comes down to kind of who makes what calls in those decisions, we're really thinking from our clinical perspective of what's going to set the child or client up for success and be able to work toward independence, both now and as their life moves forward. And so with that, sometimes that might mean that the client, child, or teen might have one idea where the parents have another. However, we really see our role as kind of that guide of how are we going to use this roadmap to move forward and make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward from there. I'd be curious, Marisa, I don't know, has this kind of come into fruition with any of the clients that you've worked with? I feel like there might be an anecdote there.
There's always an anecdote. This is definitely something that has come up. And I think, again, we go back to that goal of helping our learners with any challenges they may face with that verbal and nonverbal communication, because we know that is something that a lot of our learners do struggle with. So our first goal is always going to be helping the child articulate exactly what that disagreement is and what it's rooted in, and then guiding both the child and the family to come up with a solution. So I'm thinking of one of my guys right now, and big disagreement with the family over the Xbox. I'm sure lots and lots of parents can relate to that. And what we were able to do was come up with a strategy, both with him and with his parents, where we rolled out a self-monitoring checklist, which pretty much looks like a planner that you or I might use. And so mom and dad and this kiddo agreed that if he completed all 5 items on that self-monitoring checklist, he would go ahead and get access to the reinforcer or the reward. It was a solution that both mom and the kiddo were happy with. And when we settled on it, we were able to move past a lot of those big, loud, tantrumy, sometimes throwing object disagreements that they'd been engaging with. So whenever possible, as Allie mentioned, we like to partner, hear from both sides, help the child articulate what it is that they really want, and help parents and child work towards that resolution while continuing to grow the child's skills.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Collaboration is so important, and a support system is so important in any disorder, illness, challenge. I mean, whatever you want. There's that phrase, "No one's an island," and I really do think that it applies in so many levels. Right, what we do impacts others, and what others do impact us. And if we can support each other, I don't want to say that it's easier to move forward because I can't speak for people, but I know for myself, it's certainly been easier having a support system. One of the questions that came up is, what ages does AIM serve?
Sure, great question. So with that, we serve children typically 18 months. So that's right, that early intervention up to 18 years. And that's really kind of our primary client base. But of course, you're probably thinking 18 months to 18 years, how does that work? What a range, how much happens in that developmental cycle? So with that, I would also want to say that we really use a developmentally appropriate model where, for example, for our 18-month-year-olds or 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, some of our clients who are working their way toward more of a school setting, that we're going to look at that differently than we would with one of our school age clients. For example, it might not be appropriate to work with a child of young age, at a tabletop setting. It might be something like Marisa said, where you come into one of our clinics and you really see an active playroom where we're working on skills, we're building skills, we're working toward independence, but we're doing it in a child-friendly environment. Kind of on that flip side too, for some of our 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, that's going to look a whole lot different because although everybody loves the Lego, that's not what we're working on as much as we get older. And so with that, skills that we might work on there might fall more into the social domain. So maybe we might target some things around things like safe dating behaviors, if that's what's socially significant and important to the client at that stage of life. We might be working on some kind of higher level academic support skills, or even things to prepare them for independent living, or even, jobs eventually. And so with that, really thinking about where the child or teen or client is at in their own development is really important. Now, with that, we do work with a lot of younger children, as we know that early intervention can be really incredibly helpful. So typically, if a family does receive an autism diagnosis, we'd love to encourage getting started, or at least start exploring ABA therapy sooner rather than later, just because that is such a critical period. Now, with that, a question I get there too is often, well, what about when a child is over 18, does ABA, can it still be helpful, etc.? And the answer is yes, it can still be helpful. And you'll see ABA across all sorts of different populations, including adult populations. However, the way that it currently stands, most of our families will access services through their health insurance. So whether private or public insurance. And so with that, sometimes for adult populations, there might not be the same level of benefits as there might be for more of a pediatric population. However, one of the things that I love in this, in our field is, who behaves? We all behave. Applied behavioral analysis and some of those key strategies can help each and every one of us. You don't need to have a diagnosis for some of these strategies and tips and tricks to be helpful.
One of the questions that came up earlier is this something covered by insurance? And I know you touched on it momentarily, but insurance is such you've got the public system, you've got the Affordable Care Act, you've got private insurance, and we all talk about like, ooh, that's good health insurance, which therefore by definition means somebody has, oh, that's bad health insurance. Is this something that's covered by insurance, and is it generally covered? Is it not often covered? What about, Medicaid or Medicare? Where does it fall in that?
Great question. So with that, kind of to your great point there, Gabe, it's an evolution, and it's been an evolution. And so I want to also make sure to kind of honor a lot of folks who are out there in this community already, who have done a lot of advocacy work to help make sure that these sorts of services are covered by both public and private insurance. Now, with that, of course, a lot of good work has been done. There's always more good work left to do. However, for us and for ABA therapy, therapy, generally speaking, all 50 states have signed a mandate saying that they will include ABA therapy and autism coverage in their insurance plans. And so with that, every individual's insurance plan is different. So even if two people's cards have the same name on it, that might mean that the plan looks slightly different, or maybe the sorts of benefits or kind of, there are so many different things that go into it, to your point, Gabe. That can be a bit of a labyrinth, of a maze. And so with that, I would really encourage families, if this is something you're interested in, lean on the provider. We love it when families reach out to us and say, hey, I'm interested. Can you help me understand what this means? Because although maybe for your family, this is the first time you've gone through this process, we have experts on our client services team where this is what they do. And so with that, I'd really encourage you. So whether you were to reach out to us at Autism in Motion Clinics, or you were to reach out to somebody who's more in your neck of the woods, either way, they should be able to help you kind of work through this. Now at AIM, I can speak for our organization. We do accept medical insurance. And so with that, that's something, like I said, most of our families, if not all, utilize our services through that. Now with that, that might be employer-based plans. So those private insurance plans that I spoke of, they also might be public plans, for example, 10-care plans. And so with that, I would encourage families that this is something, if you've considered ABA therapy, or it looks like something that you're interested in, starting that process sooner rather than later to understand what your coverage might look like, verify that you have those benefits with your exact plan, and give yourself some time too, if maybe there's some documentation that might be needed. Maybe you might need updated diagnostic paperwork. Let us help you. And it can be a really confusing process when you're going through it that first time. And so with that, I would encourage, no matter if you're reaching out to us or reaching out to another community provider, let us help you, because we've had some practice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know that, we've discussed what ages that you serve, whether or not it's covered by insurance, but we haven't discussed if this is home-based or clinic-based, and I didn't put on there, or both. So do you offer home-based or clinic-based therapy, or do you offer both?
Yeah, great question, Gabe. So clinics is in our name, so that might be a little bit of a giveaway. But for us, I would say at AIM Clinics, we primarily utilize a clinic-based model. Now, of course, like I said, we're really working on that applied aspect of that applied behavioral analysis. So that also might mean, working with the family in the home if there's a behavior that we're working on, or even going into the school classroom and offering support. So with that, we also do kind of those community-based models of care. However, we are primarily clinic-based. Now, why is that? As I mentioned, a lot of our clients are working on social goals. And so it's really a wonderful thing to be able to have that local community where we can have clients working on goals alongside each other and promote that kind of peer group interaction, social skills building, etc. Additionally, we all know what that can be like too when you've got, when you're working on something at home versus in a classroom environment, for example, we all relate differently to the environment around us. And so with that, we also find that from a clinical perspective, having kind of that natural but neutral environment of a clinic can be really helpful for some of our learners to be able to start working on skills, building those skills, and then be able to generalize them to some of those more familiar environments. And so with that, I would say for us, we're primarily clinic-based, but we do home-based. We also do things with telemedicine, for example, with some of our parents, some of the training and things that we engage in. And also, I gotta say, in an active play gross motor room in a clinic where there's a climbing tower, a lot of times the kiddos like to be in the clinic. So we're happy to be able to offer that to our families and to offer some choices. One of the things too, and Marisa, you might have some things to add here, but I'll speak a little bit to it. One of the real benefits that we found on the clinical side is using a clinic-based model. Not only do you have the support of your child's therapist and their therapy team, but you also have the support of that whole clinical group that is at that clinic. And so to that end, as a BCBA board certified behavior analyst, there's opportunities for collaboration and experience sharing as well. Marisa, I'm sure you can speak to that a little bit.
Definitely. I am a huge fan of the clinic-based model, and we really, as Ali said, get the best of both worlds at AIM. I'm thinking about one of my learners who recently we went through intensive potty training. So we were able to successfully acquire that potty training skill in the clinic. We were then able to bring mom and grandma in and train them on how to use that potty training routine. And then we turnkeyed it and supported them with implementation at home. And I think that's sort of a paradigmatic example of what that can look like, where we're in the clinic, but we're still supporting beyond the clinic walls. I also think so much about the community that we're able to build through and across all of the families that we serve at the clinic. We have monthly group parent workshops. So a lot of our families have gotten to know one another. Those peer relationships are really starting to form, and we're able to support them. And then to Ali's last point, I am so firmly convinced that excellence thrives in the absence of silos. And at AIM, there are no silos. Our clinics are across a few different states, but we have so many opportunities as clinicians to come together, work on new initiatives, and make sure that if something is an awesome evidence-based practice that's doing really well in one clinic, we are elevating it and we are able to implement those best practices across all of our learners so that everyone is able to benefit from them.
I think that is an incredible. One of the things that you mentioned there is that the peer groups form. Is ABA not one-on-one? I sort of had it pictured in my head as a therapist working with a family and never the other families shall meet. So you sort of piqued my interest there when you said that peer groups form. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Mm-hmm. So all of our therapy is delivered one-on-one, but in that context. So one-on-one does not look like, little Johnny and his therapist over here and little Alice and her therapist over here and never interacting. So much of what we do, especially for those pivotal social relationships, is facilitate those interactions between peers. So it may look like responding to a peer's initiation to play Legos with them. With our older friends, it may look like staying on topic in a conversation. So while the therapy itself is one-on-one and the child will always be one-on-one with a technician, we're facilitating, group circle time. Our post-schoolers pick a game that they play every single night and practice that sportsmanship, practice that social conversation, practice so many of those other skills where it can be really hard and in many respects not super naturalistic to just be practicing with your adult therapist. It's a lot more naturalistic when you're practicing with the same age peer who also has the support of their own therapist. And then in terms of those family relationships, those have been very organically formed. Participation in our group family workshops is always at parents' comfort level. And some parents who are new to a diagnosis are not necessarily comfortable yet engaging with the community. But for some of our other parents, that was a need and a want that was expressed to really start forging those relationships with other parents who could relate, who were going through the same things. So we have just been really lucky to see those relationships blossom and, kids attending one another's birthday parties and forming some of those first pivotal social relationships in their lives with our support, which has just been fantastic to be able to be part of.
Thank you, Marisa. One of the things that you brought up is the family's comfort level and how long the kiddo has been diagnosed or, what they're aware of, et cetera. And one of the questions that came up earlier, there we go. What do I do after my child has been diagnosed with autism? Are you the first call? What does that look like? Are you the first call?
Well, I would say if somebody calls us, we will make sure that they end up in the right hands and in the right place. So typically that kind of first point of contact in every family's journey here is a little bit different, but thinking especially for those that might be diagnosed at those early ages, early stages, typically the pediatrician is the one where you'd start to have those sorts of conversations. So as you're going through those regular developmental screenings, if there's anything that they think, we might want to double click on this and just kind of watch this as the child continues to grow, monitor some of these things. So I would say the pediatrician is usually where those conversations start. Now with that, and they're usually the ones who can help to facilitate that diagnostic process. Now with that, the diagnosis process looks different for different families depending on where they are, the sorts of insurance that they have, the state that they're in. And so I can offer some general guidance with diagnostics there, but also I would say if you're in one of the states that we serve, give us a call and we can help you connect to some resources. But with that, really we'll have some families who reach out to us when they're saying, hey, I'm starting to think that my child might have autism. Great, we are there to help. We're there to help connect, and we'd love to be able to support your family. For others, they might be referred to us by their pediatrician, or even what we'll find sometimes with older clients. And, with serving a pediatric population, sometimes older is 8, 9, or 10 years old, where a client is in the school classroom and maybe a teacher, counselor, or other educator might notice some things and say, hey, it might make sense to engage in some additional screening or evaluation to make sure that your child is best supported. So with that, anytime a family wants to reach out to us, we are happy to be there and happy to help. But also, I would encourage families where if they're considering that this might be, they might be interested in exploring options here, that pediatrician is really kind of that first line of defense. And I'll tell you, I actually was meeting with some pediatricians this morning, and they shared, oftentimes they're in a place where they're that first conversation, but they want to make sure that they have that continued collaboration. And so we're really excited to be able to partner with a lot of the pediatricians in our communities to be able to offer that continuity of care. And so if families are looking at ABA therapy or considering it, I'd encourage them to consult with their pediatrician or other trusted medical providers, just because they offer a different perspective and can be really helpful in the process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, another question that came up is, what are the benefits of early intervention and ABA therapy with children and teens? And this is kind of the meat of it, right? If somebody's sitting around wondering if ABA is from them, I imagine that it's a sooner the better. I don't want to say what's the logic there, but what have you found as far as early intervention is concerned?
Do I ever have a bibliography and some research studies for you? There has been a growing body of evidence that shows an intensive, comprehensive model, which is what we will start a lot of what we call our early learners in. And that's looking at about 25 to 35 hours a week of therapy leads to the most significant gains in terms of skills catching up to same-aged peer skills. We work across what we call the 4 domains. So we look at those communication and social skills and have goals around them. We have goals around social and play skills, goals around those adaptive skills, that potty training, hand washing, toileting, and then also those behavior, repetitive, and rigidity goals. So for some of our learners, we may have 25 to 30 discrete goals that we're working on at any given time. So really that intensive model, working on that high number of goals, and then having all of those opportunities for practice throughout the week, bringing those families in every week to make sure they're on the same page, is where we're seeing the biggest gains. And of course, that model doesn't work for every family. And some of our older friends who are in school during the day are part of what we call our post-school program. So they'll generally come from around 3:30 to 6:30 in the afternoon. And again, that's a more focused program. So we might just be targeting social skills at that point. Or we might just be targeting what we like to call those activities of daily living, that hygiene, that puberty, some of those other things. But definitely early intervention. There's that body of evidence that it is so effective and so important. But that's also not to despair if you receive that diagnosis a little bit later. There's no too late to start ABA. But definitely we encourage when you identify that need and that it might be something that would benefit your family, to go ahead and reach out as soon as you have that inkling.
Yes, and I'd go ahead and add there too, Marissa. I think especially with some of our older clients, we often have families that'll come to us at a period of transition in the child's life. So it is possible that maybe as a toddler or preschooler, you might have engaged in some of that early intervention ABA. It's also possible that families might come back for an additional layer of support, during adolescence or puberty, or maybe they're working on different skills than they might have in that early treatment plan. And so with that, I encourage families that kind of, if you're in a period of transition as a family or with your child, it's a great time to consider ABA just as an additional level of support. Moreover, for us at AIM, our goal has really been to go to parts of the US that have been historically underserved in terms of autism therapy and resources. So with that, in some of our communities that we serve, families might not have had access to ABA until their child was, 13, 14, 15 years old. So with that, I would say that if that describes your situation, don't despair. There can still be a lot of help to be had. And with that too, as I mentioned, kind of that developmental approach, you want to make sure that your 15-year-old is not getting that same approach as the 5-year-old. And so for us, we really want to keep that social significance and that level of client dignity, and also just making sure that we're developmentally appropriate. But with that, I would say for families, early intervention is great. However, we can be a support throughout the child's lifespan.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, so Allie actually had a great point on that, right? Our ultimate goal is to ensure that the child reaches those growth milestones and then make ourselves irrelevant, right? We love being partners with our families, but one of the most exciting days is the day that a child graduates from services. And so we've been part of some really exciting fades lately for some of our older learners who are dropping the hours each week that they need services. And we're moving more to that consultative model with those families. So another great thing about ABA is that it is so adaptable to the unique needs of children and families. So, for some of our early intervention kiddos that are now entering school, we are fading back the hours that we're with them as they're meeting more and more goals. So can definitely be individualized, again, getting that at that applied lens.
As I sit here, one of the things that is occurring to me is, we talked about 18-month-olds, we talked about 5-year-olds, we talked about 15-year-olds, we talked about teenagers and puberty and job and transitioning to adulthood. And I'm thinking for some reason in my head that, those are just all the ages of the different people, the different clients that you're seeing. But it's still only like a 1-week process, right? Then sort of an aha moment when I was like, wait a minute, is this something that takes multiple years? I mean, would you meet with a 5-year-old and work with them all the way through, 15 young adulthood? I'm having trouble picturing that, and I'm sure that's a missing link for me.
No. And Gabe, I'm so glad you asked that. And I think to Marissa's point, every client is a little bit different, but typically for the services that we provide, at AIM in particular, they tend to be more intensive applied behavioral analysis services. So with that, when we're working with a client, we'll typically work with them for a longer course of treatment. And so with that, for some clients, that might mean, 6 months. For others, it might mean 3 years leading up to kindergarten. For some of our more targeted plans, it might just be a few months working on a few key skills. So with that, I would say, as Marisa shared, it's our goal to be out of a job. And so with that, we wouldn't necessarily work with clients for years and years and years. The idea of a decade of ABA, as much as we love ABA, is not the appropriate way to go about that. And so for us, we're really thinking about, with that individualized treatment plan, when we have an initial conversation with the family, when we do that assessment, we'll be talking a little bit too about what are some of those longer term goals for the family so that we can kind of plan backwards and build a treatment plan that's going to allow that child or teen to really succeed. So as I said, it can be anywhere from a few months to a few years, but typically they do tend to be, it's more of a commitment too. And I think that's important to acknowledge for families, especially because you might think of some other therapies that you've engaged with, where, you have a couple of sessions a week for a few months, and that's about it. And so with this, ABA really is best done when in this kind of more intensive model, that's the evidence-based approach. And so for families, you're not committing to decades of your life in therapy or with ABA, but really I would say kind of a few years of targeted support or even just a few months. But with that, your BCBA, your treatment team, that's a conversation that starts prior to day one. And it's always our goal at AIM to make sure that that's something where families really feel empowered and supported going into it. And so if you're considering ABA therapy and that's a concern, start that conversation sooner rather than later so that we can build an approach that would work best to support your family.
So it does sound like something that isn't quick. It's not 4 or 5 sessions, 4 or 5 weeks, and you're out. I mean, it's intensive, right? Would the word intensive work here?
Intensive works, but I would also say it's intensive, but that doesn't mean it's intense either. So with that, one of the things that I think is really a great kind of way to connect to and kind of unlock ABA is we're really working on those tiny baby steps toward skills. So with that, we might set a goal, and who hasn't done that, where you set a goal for yourself that might have been a little too ambitious or just a little too much, and you weren't necessarily successful in achieving it. And so when we're thinking about the clients that we serve, we're really taking a skill, like for example, potty training and kind of toileting. That's a skill that, once you're on the other side of it as an adult, you don't think about it so much, but there's a lot that goes into that. And so especially for some of our clients where, asking for things, those kind of functional communication, like there are so many building blocks that go into that. And so I think when you're thinking about ABA, really think about it that way, where not only are you working toward a skill check, it's really more of kind of that stair-step model where you're taking the little building blocks, working up to it, and eventually you hit that goal. However, for this to really best serve the client, it is a more intensive model. And so with that, those kind of building blocks, that incremental approach is something that's, I would say, somewhat unique to ABA, but really important for learning across domains and across populations.
Thank you so much. As we wind down, I know we're getting near the end, so this question is a little bit broad, and of course it is what we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes, but it's popped up a few times, and it's literally, how does ABA therapy work? Why is it effective? Why should we believe you? But specifically, how does it work? How does ABA therapy work?
Yeah, no, wonderful. I think that's such a good question. And with that, I think the families are asking the right question too. Marisa, I think I might hand this one over to you as our clinical expert.
I would say that ABA therapy works by using data to drive all of the decisions that we make. We are relentlessly committed to our data. One of my parents and I were joking the other day that I can tell her every single time her son has used the bathroom in the past year. So we are relentlessly committed to data, relentlessly committed to family priorities, and we bring those two things together to constantly inform our instruction. So we take where the learner is at. We do both norm referenced assessments. So where is the learner at compared to their same age peers? We also do some criterion referenced assessments. So where is the learner at in terms of scores on these assessments? And we don't just take that data and say go. We take that data, we combine it with the family priorities, and then we inform our treatment plans. And each and every one of our kiddos, again, works with that one-on-one therapist. And they also have their BCBA, whether it's me or another BCBA, checking in on that progress on a daily basis. So we spend up to 20% of a child's time really tweaking, modifying, and refining teaching instructions for every single goal that we're working on. And for some of our learners, that might look like responding to their name. For others of our learners, that might look like, gaining someone else's attention. And for other learners, it might be personal safety, not eloping and running out into the middle of the street, or decreasing the rate at which they might engage in physical aggression. So no matter what the goal is, Within ABA, we are taking data constantly. We are applying systematic interventions that have an evidence base in them. We are really lucky at AIM to partner with a number of universities and to draw on a lot of really high quality research. So we are using interventions that have demonstrated efficacy in research. We're not throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? We are taking interventions that we know have demonstrated evidence, and we are applying it to the child's specific context, and then we are constantly taking data. So when I meet with my parents every single week, they always know it's show me the graphs time, right? We are looking at how many times that child did successfully void on the potty, and what were the unique contributors to that increasing trend, and how can we further increase that trend to increase those successes? How many times did the child engage in tantrums in the previous week? And what are the specific antecedent interventions? So what did we do to, on the front end, help reduce the probability they would have that tantrum? And then what did we do on the back end to ensure that we weren't inadvertently causing more tantrums? So I might be diving a little bit too into the weeds, but ABA works because it is so rooted in that data, so rooted in that evidence and that research from the past, and committed to bringing those two things together to meet the family and the child where they're at.
Oh, thank you both so very much. Now, when we talk about AIM clinics, Tennessee is a gigantic state. And I want to say AIM clinics is available all over Tennessee. Is that true?
I would say yes, but we're working on connecting all the dots. So right now we do have clinics that are open for enrollment in the Memphis area, in Middle Tennessee, Nashville, Clarksville, also Knoxville. We are opening 2 clinics there and are very excited to be in that community, in addition to Chattanooga as well. So with that, like I said, we're kind of working on connecting those dots, but also whether we're in your neighborhood now or we're coming there soon, we are always happy to help connect you with resources that might be in your area if we're not able to help just yet. However, with that, we're in a really lucky place where we grow, and we grow in response to the need that we see. And so with that, there are families across the state of Tennessee that are looking for these sorts of services. And so with that, we're continuing to grow to meet that need. So I'd encourage you to take a look at our website and see our listed locations. You'll see things updated there. However, also if you have questions about your specific area, always do feel free to reach out, and we're more than happy to keep you updated on whether if we're coming to that area or if we have another allied health professional that we could connect you with that might be able to help connect you with services.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. Obviously, the website is at the bottom of your screen right there, aimclinics.com. Check it out. Are there any last words? You can ask yourself any question you want and answer it. See how flexible we are here at NAMI Tennessee? What would you like our viewers to know?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Gabe. And one thing I'd encourage for parents, especially those who are either kind of early in the diagnosis process or maybe in that period of transition once again, is that you're not in this one by yourself. As you said earlier, Gabe, no man is an island. And with that, the community of support is out there for you. And so whether we can be an entry point or there are other really great other community organizations such as NAMI Tennessee, know that you're not in this one alone and that people want to be of service and to help you. With that too, I'd really suggest for families or even folks who might work with individuals on the autism spectrum and just want to learn more, we have a really lovely resources tab on our website that has a variety of blogs that kind of cover some of the typical questions we might get from families and can just be a really valuable resource. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that too if you'd like to do a little bit more reading and learn a little bit more about how ABA can be applied to a variety of different situations and behaviors. But with that, really that idea of our community, it's in our mission for a reason. We all need that community to do well and to have that community of support. And so we're happy to be able to be a part of yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Marisa, the same question. You can ask yourself anything and then answer it. Isn't that awesome? What would you like our viewers to know?
I think just how incredibly lucky we are to partner with our learners and to partner with our families. The trust that you place in your child's healthcare providers and educators is an incredible trust and not one that we take lightly. And we are so lucky to, as Ali said, and as you mentioned, walk this path with our families. We are here to partner with you. We are here to do everything we can to ensure that your child has access to the opportunities they deserve in life, and we are here for the journey. However, we can be most supportive, and we know that that looks different for every single kiddo and for every single family. So thank you for those families who have invited us to be part of their journeys. And to other families, we are here. We, are so grateful for every single one of those milestones that we get to be a part of, and hope that in the future our jobs are irrelevant, but for the time being, share all of that joy, share all of that laughter, and share all of those successful voids on the potty.
Marisa, Ali, thank you both so much for being here. It is really appreciated. And to all of our viewers, if you tune in week after week, you know exactly what I'm going to say. Join the NAMI Tennessee email list. I get a toaster if 10 of you sign up. It's not true. I don't get a toaster. But I really do think that you would benefit from being on NAMI Tennessee's email list. You find out about really cool events like this. Think about it. The people on the list got to see Ali and Marisa, and the people not on the list missed it. I mean, that alone is worth the price of admission. Just head over to namitn.org. Big round of applause for our guests. Thank you both so much for being here. It is really, really appreciated. And to our viewers, we will see you same time, same place next week here on NAMI Tennessee at Home Facebook Lives. Bye, everyone.